All right, so this driving story time video is kind of similar to the one about the road trip gummies. This time it is the story of when I consumed 3 full bags of Wunder synthetic legal magic mushroom gummies. It's one of those, like, if you heard the road trip one, story's basically the same. One of those I know that I'm gonna need a pretty strong dose to be able to get a transcendent experience when dosing back to back, you know, several consecutive days. So again, I get the Wunder gummies, I start downing them. The Wunder gummies are fine. I prefer road trip over Wunder solely because Wunder gummies are a fair bit bigger and chewier. And I don't like that texture, that consistency. Right, and so like for a lot of these gummies, that the texture and consistency is like not as important as the ability of the gummy to mask the synthetic substance that makes you trip. Right, it has a very bitter, awful taste. And to Wunder's credit, it masks it pretty well. Right, like you can chew them and it's not going to taste like the bitter substance. It just tastes like a gummy candy. Unfortunately, it's just I don't prefer the flavor and the texture solely from a gummy perspective. So this one took me a lot longer to get down. There's 10 per bag, so I'm still doing 30 gummies. My max was 60 gummies in a singular setting, so obviously this wasn't too much of a problem, but this was a lot more chewy of an experience. You can't just swallow them as easily or you're gonna barf. It is what it is. So I get them down and I start having another one of those pretty intense, anxiety-filled come-ups. And did my usual indica, you know, smoke a little bit of it at like the 30-minute or so mark after finishing everything. Calm me down a bit. I'm trying to play video games. I was playing the Avatar video game. And if you have that game and you have the ability to trip, do that as soon as possible, because the world of Pandora is on its own trippy as fuck, both in like a narrative story perspective of the idea of like the whole world being interconnected in a way that you kind of only really feel when you're on psychedelics. But at the same time, all the plants and shit are like super wacky and super colorful. And so I'm out here having like insane visuals while trying to play this game. And I'm like slumped over, like barely able to move. This was a very stoning trip where like it was just bleh. And like at one point, I've just got like the controller like held down where my guy is walking forward. I'm just staring at the screen, listening to music while the guy's just walking through the forest aimlessly. I'm having like monsters attacking me and shit, and I'm like trying to desperately evade them, but I am not nearly coherent enough to actually fight back. So I'm having to like hide in the fucking trees and like crouch in the trees and wait for them to go away. And then I resume my walking aimlessly through the forest, staring at like, oh, all the pretty colors, and was amazing. Until I just fully passed the fuck out. Like this was not a road trip intense heroic dose where I was like in and out for like a little while. I was fucking out. This was like it just was awake and then was not. And then like an hour later woke up again like, oh fuck, what? And then immediately out again. It was like that for maybe 4 hours of me fully going unconscious and then abruptly like, whoa, what the fuck? And then immediately going out again. I don't even know how many times this happened. Like with the road trip crazy heroic dose, like the visuals and all the shit in like closed eye visuals, crazy. And so the thing with these synthetic products is almost all of them use a substance called 4-ACO-DMT. And the thing that makes 4-ACO-DMT kind of unique compared to standard psilocybin is while on lower or moderate doses, it's gonna feel basically identical. It's got a bit more of like a robotic-y technology vibe to it rather than a explicitly like nature earthy. It's a smidge different in sensation, but most people won't notice. But on high heroic doses, pretty much everybody says it feels like DMT, like straight DMT. And yeah, I don't know how else to describe the experience that I had, where it was I've not done straight DMT before. I can't say for sure, but from like hearing people's stories, seeing visual demonstrations of what it's going to look like, some of the processes, this was like a prolonged DMT trip. Rather than your typical 15 to 30 minute DMT trip, 4ACO DMT intense heroic trips will last hours. And much like with the road trip one, this wasn't an unpleasant experience. I wasn't even like nauseous at this point. I was just not a person. I was just fully along for the ride. There was no sense of like, oh, this is a problem, or, oh, I would like to, you know, be awake for longer than 5 minutes at a time. It was just, that's how it was. It just was that way. No judgment assessment, no pros and cons. It just was a very weird feeling. And much like with the road trip, I just fully fell asleep at some point. I have no idea when this was. I had no sense of time as to when this was. And I woke up the next day at like 10 a.m. feeling completely fine and refreshed. No lingering after sensations other than the typical afterglow. And while a heroic trip is extremely intense in the during, the afterglow, boy fucking howdy, is worth it. To where like you're having an afterglow that basically just feels like the classic euphoria of a lower dose trip, but with like none of the debilitating aspects. You just feel great for days afterward. And so once again with the other ones, 3 bags of Wunder, do not recommend to any person unless you again have a death wish or are extremely experienced. Like this amount was so shocking that in a post on my Reddit, when I mentioned that this was done, the literal makers of Wunder on their official Reddit account posted a comment being like, bro, you ate 3 full bags? Like, if the makers are like, dude, what the fuck? Like, you probably shouldn't take that much. I survived it. I don't know if I'm going to get some sort of weird poisoning 5 years down the line, but as of right now, it worked perfectly fine for me. Wasn't the most productive of trips. At that amount of potency, it's not productive. You're just there. But yeah, that's what happened. Those were the both the road trip and the Wunder. Those are the 2 times that I've ever like fully passed out from literally anything. Can't say I recommend it outside of, you know, saying you've done it. I probably don't.